All right, so we're going to talk about equations of a circle. And so the standard form of the equation of the circle is here, x minus h quantity squared plus y minus k quantity squared equals r squared. And in this, hk is the center of the circle. So these are the ordered pairs, the x-coordinate and the y-coordinate for the center of the circle. R is the radius of the circle. So in this equation, you always have to square the radius. And x comma y are just coordinates of points on the circle. And the good thing about this is the standard form of a circle, the equation is on your formula sheet. So this is not one you have to memorize. You just have to know what the pieces are and what to look for. All right, so in this, get these out of the way. When you write an equation of a circle, you're looking for two things. You need the coordinates of the center, and then you need the radius. Now, about 99% of the time for problems you'll see, you will either be given the coordinates of the center or they will give you a picture where you can identify the center on the graph. They won't always give you the radius. Sometimes they'll give you the radius, sometimes they'll give you the diameter, sometimes they'll give you the area or circumference and you have to go find the radius, or they'll give you the point, another point on the graph, on the circle, and you have to figure out what the radius is. But at least let this guide you that some way you have to be able to figure out what the radius of the circle is. All right, so we're going to do some practice here. I'm actually going to move these out the way. And so I kind of set these sheets up. It goes along with your notes. So you can just go along with me. But now we just need to figure out, well, the two things we need are the center and the radius. So if we have that, we can write the equation. And it just so happens that this problem actually gave us the center and the radius. So here we know the center is 5, 3, and the radius is 2. So now we can just plug it in. It's x minus the x-coordinate of the center is 5 squared plus y minus the y-coordinate, which is 3 squared, equals the radius, which is 2 squared, which is 4. And so here would be the equation of the circle with the center at 5, 3, and a radius of 2. All right, so let's try the second example. We need a center and a radius. In this case, they gave us a center and a radius. So our center is -1, 7, and our radius is 14. So here we're just going to plug in. Now be careful because this says a -1, and if you do minus a -1, you really get +1. So this will be x plus 1 x plus 1 squared plus, this is still y minus 7 squared equals the radius squared. So remember that it's going to be 14 squared, which is 196. And so this would then be the equation to that circle. All right, let's try example 3. Remember, the two things we need are the center and the radius. So here our center was given to us. It's -2 and -11. But they gave us a diameter and we need a radius. So if the diameter is 18, remember the radius is half the diameter, so this would be 9. And so now we have everything that we need, so we're going to go ahead and plug this in. So this will be x plus 2, because remember, if you plus y plus 11 squared equals the radius, which is 9, square that, it's 81. Okay, so make sure you don't square the diameter. And that's the equation for that circle. Now if we look at number 4, we have the center, which was given to us, which is 0, 9. And they gave us a diameter of 32, but we need a radius, so that the radius is 16. So now we're going to fill it in. We get x minus 0 squared plus y minus 9, squared equals, now we're going to do the radius squared. So remember that's going to be 16 squared, which is 256. Now, one thing I wanted to show you, probably will never see the equation written with this x minus 0, because x minus 0 is really just x. So when the center has a coordinate of 0 somewhere, you'll just see x squared plus y minus 9 squared equals 256. And that's the equation for that circle. Okay? So in this one, we are given a center and a radius, but our radius looks a little strange because our radius has a square root in it. Doesn't matter. Let's just go ahead and plug in what we know. So we have x plus 4. Remember, that's a negative 4, so we're going to, becomes plus, again, y minus 0 squared equals. Now, we got to take the radius and square it. So if I'm take the square root of 47 and I square it, remember the square root and the square cancel each other out, so we're just left with 47. Again, we're not going to keep that y minus 0, so we rewrite this as x plus 4 in parentheses squared plus y squared equals 47. And here will be the equation for that circle. So you go ahead and pause the video and you try number 6. All right, so in doing this, this is what you should have gotten for that one. Okay. All right, so let's look at example 7. And here we just have a picture of a circle, a graph of a circle, and we want to write the equation, which we can do. We just need to make sure we find the necessary information. So we need the coordinates of the center, and we need to find the radius. So here the coordinates of the center are 3, -2, and we can find that just from looking at the graph. So this is 3, -2. And the radius, we start at the center and count till we get to an edge. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And you can double check in any direction to see that that's also 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right, so now we have our center and radius, and we're just going to do what we've been doing. X minus 3 squared plus y plus 2 squared equals the radius, which is 5, square it, which is 25. Okay. All right, so the next one, number 8, we're given a center and a point on the circle. And remember, the two things we need are the center, which they gave us, 9, 10. But they didn't give us the radius, and we need to find the radius. So what we're going to do, remember that the point on the circle can be filled in here for the x and y values, and then we can fill in the center for h and k, and we can solve for the r squared. So we're just going to go ahead and plug all these pieces in. So we're going to plug in x from here. So 7 minus the 9 from the center plus y, which is 4, minus the k value, which would be 10 squared equals the radius squared, because we still don't know what the radius is. So now we can just work this out, and this will be good if you just type in the Desmos, and we get 40 equals radius squared. Now, to find what the radius is, we would take the square root of 40. But for the sake of writing the equation, we want to know r squared over here, and this is what we had solved for. So instead of actually going to find the radius unless they ask you for it, we're just going to leave it there. So now we have x minus 9 squared plus y minus 10 squared equals the radius squared, which is 40. Now 40 is not the radius, it is the radius squared. All right, so let's try it again. Number 9, they gave us the center, but they gave us also a point on the circle. So we can plug the center in for h and k, and we can plug in the point on the circle for k and y, and we can figure out what r squared is. So let's do that. So we get -7, minus 1 squared plus y, which is -13, plus 5 squared equals the radius squared. Okay, so now we're just going to type all this in the Desmos to figure out what r squared is, or you can do it step by step. And so when we do that, we get that this is 128 is equal to radius squared. So now that we know what that is, we can now write our equation. So we're going to do x minus 1 squared, because we're going to use the center, plus y plus 5 squared equals 128. And so that is the equation of the circle. So now go ahead and pause the video and you try the next two on your own, and then come back and check. All right, so if you look here, you should have gotten x minus 2 squared plus y plus 6 squared equals 257. All right, and so this is what you should have gotten for question 11. Should have been able to go through, we got r squared was 65, and then plug that into the equation. All right, so if we look at question 12, they gave you a center and a circumference. So remember, we need a center and we need the radius. They didn't give us the radius, but giving us the circumference, we can go find the radius, because circumference is equal to 2 pi r. So now if we know the circumference, we just got to work backwards. So we have 6 pi is equal to 2 pi r. And now we're trying to get r by itself when we solve this. So we're going to divide both sides. We're going to divide both sides by 2 pi. So here the pi's cancel, so we're left with 3 is equal to, and then here 2 cancel is equal to r. So now we know the radius is 3. So now we have our center and we know the radius is 3, so we can go ahead and plug it in. X plus 1 squared plus y minus 4 squared equals the radius 3 squared, which is 9. And here is the equation of the circle with a center at -1, 4, and has a circumference at 6 pi. All right, so you go ahead and pause the video and you try number 13. And so if you went ahead and solved this one, you did get that the radius was a decimal. That's fine, it's 8.5. And then you can go ahead and square it, and this would have been the equation that you got. So if we look at number 14, they gave us the center and the area. So we also know that we can work backwards and find the radius from area, because we know that area is equal to pi r squared. So now we just got to work backwards. So 16 pi equals pi r squared. So we're trying to get the r by itself, so we're going to divide both sides by pi. And so now we're left with 16 is equal to the radius squared. Now technically we can just stop right here, because we do need radius squared. But if we wanted to find the radius, we'd just take the square root, and we know the radius is 4. Okay, so now here we're going to plug it in. So x plus 8 squared plus y plus 11 squared equals the radius, which is 4, squared, which is 16. So this would be your equation. Okay, so there's your answer there. And go ahead and pause the video and you try number 15 and see how you do. All right, so we had to work backwards. We got that radius squared is 361. And because we technically need the radius squared, we don't have to go back. The radius would be 19 though. And then we go ahead and plug it all the center information in the area and the radius into the formula. And that's your equation. All right, so one of the big things we got to be able to do is go backwards. So here, we're given the equation and we need to be able to tell me what the center and the radius are. So in this case, I tried to line them up with the equation. So you know the center is your h and your k value. So we need this value here and we need this value here. So our center will be 5, 1. And our radius is the square root of this, because remember this is r squared, so the radius is 8. All right, in example 17, again, to get our center, we need here, but be careful, this is a plus 7, and the standard form says minus, so that gives us the clue that this should be -7, +2. And the radius here would be the square root of 324, which is 18. And I believe this question on your notes might ask for the diameter, and so that if it does, the diameter would be twice this, which would be 36. All right, pause the video and you try this one, or you try the next two. So if you look at this one, the center would be 0, -10. The radius is 6.5, so the diameter would be 13. And in example 19, the center, again, I'm pulling from here, would be a +6 and a -11. And the radius would be the square root of 58. And since 58 is not a perfect square, we can just leave it square root of 58. Okay, so on the bottom of your notes, problem 20 is a challenge question when they gave you 2 endpoints that are on the diameter. See if you can come up with that. Other than that, we're all done.